welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer, Chris Carter. This is Nick Wright. It is Hump Day. What's going on, guys?
Good morning, everybody.
It's Wednesday. Yeah.
Man, I'm going to have to pull it. I feel like a subpar performance.
Oh.
What do you mean?
He's just going against what he said to you 30 seconds ago to throw you off, and it worked.
And it worked
brilliantly.
Brilliantly. Thank you
Jenna
very
was
much.
like,
memory of
what?
a squirrel.
I have.
I mean, is that a car?
Do they have one?
Is that a car? Is that a car? It's another car. The same car. I mean, this is unbelievable.
You're right. You
Great to
did.
see
You
Jenna.
threw me off.
You ever seen Finding Nemo?
Yes, I did.
Who
You
has
know
a stronger
Ellen's
memory, a
character
squirrel
in
or a
that?
fish?
Well, yeah, well, exactly. The Ellen's character. in
Oh,
that.
where she forgets everything immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did I see that movie?
Dory's
I
her
think I did.
name, I believe. They had a spin-off.
Should we start the show? I forgot what I was doing here for a second.
We're
but
gonna
maybe
do a
the show.
sports television
Okay.
show.
Starting your show.
Just 3 hours. That's it. Then I'll go back to squirrel life. We start off the program with Cavs Warriors, Part 4. LeBron and the Cavs taking on Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and the Golden State. Truth is, LeBron carried his team to the NBA Finals. And while Kevin Durant didn't have to, many are doubting whether he even could. KD responded to this saying, quote, "I can't control that. I know what I bring to my team. I know my role on my team. I'm just trying to play in a way that will help us win a championship. That is the only thing I can do." All right, we're going to start breaking down this series, which begins tomorrow night. CeCe, what was your reaction to Kevin Durant's comments?
I don't have much of an overreaction to Kevin Durant. The reason why is because, I think I know a version of a person. A guy who does not like the limelight, a guy who does not want to be a leader, a guy who said, I just want to play video games and play basketball. So I try to accept him on the premise of those things. But it's really, really hard knowing that he has the type of talent that he has. And we're just in a business of comparing people, players, teams, and we just don't have a lot of people that have the type of talent that Kevin Durant has, and they don't have any interest in being a team leader. Like, just no interest at all. So I accept Kevin Durant. I accept the gift that he has of basketball, and I can't judge him on too much besides that because, Kevin Durant, he just wants to be a normal guy.
Here's the thing, though, see. He wants to just play video games and hoop, but he also wants to be considered the best basketball player alive. This is something he has been, with his comments from years ago to recently, very clear about. The famous Sports Illustrated cover from about 5 years ago saying, I was the number 2 player coming out of high school. I was the number 2 pick of the draft. I was second in the MVP. I came in second in the NBA Finals. I'm done with all that. Kevin Durant saying that not only the torch had been passed from him to LeBron, but if you speak to people around KD, or really more accurately around the top players in the league who all in this culture hang together, KD believes he's the best basketball player alive and wants people to believe it. And
Is that so different than a lot of other people?
Here's why it's different to me with KD.
Because he could be.
Because he could be, and if you'd never seen any of these guys play, and it was just all-time greats and contemporary greats, and you're out saying, all right, describe the player to me, who's going to be the first overall pick? And they describe Michael Jordan, right? All right, he's 6'6", crazy athlete, insane competitor, and will outwork everyone. Okay, that sounds interesting. All right, I like him. Describe Akeem Olajuwon to me. Almost 7 feet, one of the most amazing footwork you're ever going to see.
Sprints like a deer.
Sprints like a deer, and soft touch on a jump shot. Oh, okay, that guy's interesting. Who's this guy over here? Describe Kevin Durant to me. Okay, he's 7'1". He can shoot as well as almost anyone you've ever seen, has a guard's ball handling ability, seemingly never gets tired, and can protect the rim. You'd say, wait, the guy that's 7'1" shoots better than the guy that's 6'6". Oh, he can handle the ball better than the guy LeBron, who's he? He's 6'8". Oh, I'll take that guy. So he has that ability, and I think he was en route to being considered this guy. Had he won a championship in OKC, the narrative's different. Had he stayed in OKC, the narrative's different. You don't always get everything in life. He got his championship. The sacrifice there was he ceded the opportunity to be the consensus best player in the world.
Bouncing off what you said, can you be that guy? Can you be the best player in the world without having all those other qualities, without having the leadership quality, without having the team rah-rah guy, without, being the one that's not going to have the Twitter accounts, never get yourself into any kind of off-the-court situations, whatever it is. Can you be the best player in the world but not have all those other attributes?
Yeah, you can be the best player in the world. You just can't be alive when LeBron James is playing in his prime.
Because LeBron is those things.
Yeah, but you don't have to be all those other things off the court, Jenna, to be the best player. Like, all those things are just extra. Those are things that you do. That's got nothing to do with your evaluation. Like, we don't evaluate Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers based on, do they do things social media-wise, how much access? No, we base it on what they do on the field.
But if you're just basing it on what they do on the court, he's the second best player in the league right now. Why are we having this conversation?
Because we're talking about the best player. Because we're talking about the best player. That's the question. The question is, how do you measure up against LeBron? And this is where I'm sure it's frustrating for him. He's the Finals MVP. They are maybe the biggest favorite in an NBA Finals ever. He is the better than even money favorite to win Finals MVP again. And he knows, guess what? They're still not going to consider me the best guy in the world. Like, he knows that. Now, you're saying there's nothing he could do. It's more about how great LeBron is rather than anything about KD.
Yeah, because it has nothing to do with him being 7 feet. Like, he can't lead a team like LeBron because he doesn't have the same skill set. LeBron can play in the post. LeBron's got an intermediate game. LeBron's improved his three-point shooting. Like, LeBron can handle the ball. LeBron has the mentality. He's always been this guy. High school, 27, 9, and 8. 15 years in the NBA, what's the number?
Right, almost the exact same, 27, 8.
Yeah, yep. LeBron is a new and improved Magic Johnson. Also, he has the same leadership skills that Magic Johnson have. Now, Michael Jordan was a leader, but he was a leader in a different way. Kobe was a leader. He was a leader in a different way. We didn't hold that against their basketball, how we evaluate them as basketball, because we knew that was their personality. I accept Kevin Durant as the personality that he has. Being a little different, being a little bit odd, not like other players that we're used to seeing. So I accept that.
Here's the thing, and I accept it as well. I just think it's important to realize, and this is almost like a life lesson, you don't get to get everything all the time. And KD made a choice here. Like, KD, I can look at the last 5 years he spent in OKC, and similarly to with CP3's injury in the Rockets, I look at it and say there's some context needed. In 2012, they go to the finals. They lose to a better team, an older team, a team that was more ready in Miami. In 2013, they're the best team in basketball. They have 60 wins, or the best team in the West, certainly, depending on what you think of the Heat. In the first round, Russell Westbrook hurts his knee. He's done. That season's gone. 2014, they are the second best team in basketball. They take the Spurs to a 6th game of the Western Conference Finals that they lose in overtime. In that series, Serge Ibaka gets hurt. He was very important to that team. That Spurs team goes to mop the floor with LeBron in Miami. There was an opportunity. 2015, he's out for the year. 2016, he's up 3-1. On a team that would have been a heavy favorite over Cleveland. Any of those years go differently, and if he had won a title, if he had carried a team like LeBron to a championship, people talk about him differently. But when he then leaves to go to Golden State, it was never going to be his team. He was just like, would you agree we look at LeBron differently? But forget the 2 championships in Miami. Since the championship in Cleveland. That's what elevated LeBron to a special space, even a higher echelon than he was in Miami. Like, that's the opportunity.
Well, because what the team achieved, who they were going against, the circumstances for which he achieved those things, all those things tell a story. And also, we saw LeBron grow his game. Like, he improved in so many other areas. So it's just hard to compare without taking things away from great players.
So as long as LeBron's playing, I feel like there's no real true comparison between KD and LeBron James. But if LeBron James wasn't playing, would this be a foregone conclusion that Kevin Durant is the greatest player with everything combined with what he's won and what he's done?
I don't think it'd be as unanimous as LeBron is right now, but I think he would get the votes. I think he'd be the plurality, the majority. Some people would say Steph. Some people would say Harden. But, I mean, Durant would probably get 60, 70% of the votes. What this comes down to is is KD truly believes he's better, that he is the best guy.
Yeah, and I just think there's more athletes like that. They think they're better than what they are. And KD is the second best player in the world. Why wouldn't I think I was the best player in the world? He's a special, special player. LeBron is better. LeBron can do more. LeBron can win more different ways. LeBron doesn't need the type of talent around him that KD needs.
You don't think KD knows that? You think KD?
It doesn't matter. Everyone has their own reality.
No, I
we make up
that.
this stuff. We live in this fantasy that we create. Kevin Durant has created that fantasy a lot like other people. So why would I judge him any different? Just because he has some skill on the basketball court? No. I expect athletes, most of them, myself included, all of us think we're better than what we are. Kevin Durant is in that same, he just happens to be in the same time period as LeBron James.
All right. Let's take a break there. We'll talk about this some more over the course of the next couple hours. But coming up, now this is an interesting story. Why was an NBA GM anonymously ripping his own players online? It's next. First things first.
Trying to be more like KD. At Buffalo Wild Wings, we'll admit that we often go overboard with our limited time offerings. We just can't help ourselves. Take our new signature sampler. For $15, you get wings and 3 shareable options, like fried pickles or cheese curds. Then there's our aptly named over-the-top nachos, a literal mountain of crispy tortilla chips loaded with your choice of pulled pork or honey barbecue chicken, corn, jalapenos, and more. Then top it all off with our new platinum margarita. Go overboard with us today at Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports. Available for a limited time while supplies last. Please drink responsibly.
Tonight, moving on to the portion of our show where someone in a high position has reportedly done something so dumb it could cost him his job. More specifically, the Philadelphia 76ers and their general manager, Brian Colangelo. A report from The Ringer revealing Colangelo was operating 5 anonymous Twitter accounts simultaneously, using them to criticize members of his own team and coaching staff, including Joel Embiid, Markelle Fultz, and former Sixers GM Sam Hinkie. Colangelo reportedly admitted using one of the accounts, but has denied using the other 4. All right, Nick, this one had us all talking in our morning meeting. What was your reaction to the report?
All right, so it's a long read, and I know people don't really like reading long things anymore, but you should read it. And once you read it and you look at the sequence in which the accounts were deactivated, what was said, once you hear from guys like Adrian Wojnarowski that a lot of these tweets are things that Colangelo has said publicly or privately in league circles, it is almost, to me, impossible to believe he was not operating these accounts. I know he's denying it. I do not believe his denial. I believe he was operating these accounts as the article lays out in great detail. So to me, it's very simple. This cost him his job. He was torching Joel Embiid. He torched the head coach at times. He was leaking, and I don't even know if it's legal to leak medical information about players. It's certainly unethical to leak medical information about players. This is a mistake you can't make. This is going nuclear in a way that there's no coming back from. So, I think for the Philadelphia perspective, it's a simple answer. This is his last day or one of his last days in charge of this basketball team. You can't have the things he said about Markelle Fultz and Joel Embiid out there, especially while he's promoting Ben Simmons, if for no other reason than it could create rifts there. To me, it's an untenable situation.
Yeah, and it's a mistake is something that, an oversight, maybe I send out a tweet and I sent it on first things first account compared to sending it on Chris. That's something right there that's easily explained. I wouldn't call this a mistake. When you have 5 accounts, when you release the type of information and the way it's played out, Okafor, as far as his injury with other teams, that he passed the physical, that type of information, we know, we've been involved in the sports world long enough to know that that's inside information. I'm not shocked that he got caught. I believe there's more people out there doing this. Just like we had the Kevin Durant thing, not only him having an account, I just believe that people are not happy with their life and they live these lives like that they want to make up. Like their life is not as important. His comments, all he had to do was have a reporter. He could have had a person that he released information to. People do it all the time in the national media. That could have been his person he could have fed information to if he wanted to do that. But the social media, I don't get it. I didn't get to Kevin Durant. I don't get this. He should definitely lose his job. And if he doesn't lose his job, if I'm Joel Embiid, if I'm Markelle Fultz, I don't know what my future looks like long term in Philadelphia, because that's not a guy that I can trust. That's not a guy that I want to control my basketball future. You know, I know the players don't want to get involved in that, but there's a lot of holes here for Brian Colangelo that I believe that they can't answer.
And just real quick, and it's not just that. I think the last point you made is an important one. Trust your basketball future. This isn't a trainer, assistant coach, the president of business ops. This is the guy, Jenna, that is in charge of who is and isn't on the team.
Comings and goings.
Yeah, he's supposed to have the highest basketball IQ in the building.
So that's my biggest issue with it. If he's not fired, and we should mention that he did go to Joel Embiid and say, listen, man, I want you to know I didn't do this. And Joel said, I have to trust you because what other proof do I have otherwise? But how do you trust a guy that's in charge of writing up your contracts? How do you trust a guy who's in charge of paying you, of whether you stay on that team or not? So
and a guy that knows your medical history.
And a guy that knows your medical, and a guy that'd be willing to release your medical history.
Well, every GM's going to know your medical history.
Right, of course, but every GM, you don't worry, is going to sign up as Dr. Basketball 1, 2, 3 and be tweeting it to people and arguing with people. And it's also on a bigger, just societal note, like, no matter how rich you are, this guy, if people don't know Brian Colangelo's story, his dad is one of, I don't want to say godfathers, but one of the leading men in professional basketball, owned a team, head of USA Basketball. His dad has given him a few jobs. Brian Colangelo, because he's the son of a famous person, in your mind you might think he's younger than he is. He's 52 years old. He's a grown man running a basketball team who was going online anonymously, arguing with people, allegedly, about the shape of the collars of his dress shirts. Like who else would want to do that? I mean,
all signs point at being him. My question to you both is, why? What do you think he gains from doing this? Is it that he was so just desperate to get this information out that this was the only way possible he knew how? I mean, how much of this changes the course of what happens on this team? Why would he do something like this?
It's insecurity, and it's the need to get credit for things. Sam Hinkie had become he was more popular in death than he was in life, you know what I mean, to use a metaphor. He became something of a folk hero amongst NBA Twitter and amongst Philadelphia fans and Philadelphia bloggers. And this guy didn't want that. This guy wanted the credit. He wanted it to be known, no. I'm fixing his mistakes. That's why. Why is he releasing this about Jahlil Okafor? Oh, because that was a Hinkie pick. Why is he talking about the problems with Fultz being Fultz's own doing? Because that's his pick. And we didn't even mention that one of these Twitter accounts, before they traded for the Celtics' #1 overall pick, tweeted out weeks before the exact trade Philly ended up doing. So he's also like leaking if another team in the league was onto this before the Ringer, they're like, you know what? This is Colangelo's Twitter. We're going to keep this to ourselves. They then had information that hurt Philadelphia's ability to compete.
Yeah, I'm just not surprised. I mean, it's a lot of twisted people out there, and successful people are in that category. So I'm not surprised. I believe that Philadelphia should fire him immediately. And then if I'm on that team, then I feel better as far as going forward, because it's real. Markelle Fultz, he might not recover in a way. They still might trade him. All right? I mean, they might trade him somewhere this offseason. If they don't get LeBron and they want to try to improve that team, that's on the board to happen. So if I'm a player there, you know you're not going to feel comfortable until he's out of the building.
All right. I'm sure we'll have more layers to this story. We'll see what happens to Colangelo before the day's end. Coming up.
Don't need to stay off of the social media. Relying on getting verification
should the Rockets
from social media.
run it back with the same group next year? That's next on First Things First. Time for some stories to start your morning. Not that funny, Nick. Brought to you by the unexpected energy of ExxonMobil. The Chargers are searching for a new tight end after losing Hunter Henry for the year. One candidate, former Charger Antonio Gates. Team released him earlier this offseason. Philip Rivers says it would get my vote. to bring Gates back. CC, should the Chargers bring back Antonio Gates?
And now, fans, I know you watch a lot of football. Antonio Gates has been a great player, but this is full speed. This is not slow motion. This is Antonio.
These highlights.
Yeah, this is him. This is full speed. You know, you watch the high school videos and the kids have it sped up so they look a lot faster.
Yeah.
No, this one's not sped down. This is real time. Of course, he would be an addition to the locker room, very familiar with the quarterback. But what they were trying to do was get faster and younger at the position. Yes, an injury makes you look at someone like him, but they still need to get a guy who's undersized, who can run and stretch the middle of the field.
I think it's fair to say they wouldn't have cut ties with Antonio Gates when they did if Hunter Henry wasn't on the team. It was about getting faster. It was also, we want to feature this young future star as much as possible.
Yes.
So now they have information they didn't have then, which is that he's gone. Now, maybe you still need to add speed to it, but this would have been the first phone call I made when I found out Hunter Henry's knee was blown, was I would have called
I'm
Antonio
a little concerned,
Gates.
though. He got suspended before last season for 4 games for performance-enhancing drugs.
It's a good point.
All right, to the NBA draft now. Villanova star Dante DiVincenzo will enter the draft. He was named the Final Four's most outstanding player when he scored 31 points in the national title game. Nick, what do you think of DiVincenzo as a pro prospect?
I think this is a great story. This is a guy that was on no one's radar to come out this year, was extraordinary in the Final Four, particularly the national championship game, and then blew everyone away with the athletic testing at the combine. Listen, the knock on a player such as DiVincenzo typically is he going to be a good enough athlete to defend? And he is a good enough athlete to defend.
No, he's a great athlete.
He's a great athlete.
Yeah,
and
if you know basketball, you know that he is a great athlete. But just like last year's rookies, we saw them struggle. Guys who were stars, premier players in college basketball. This guy was a sixth man on a great team. Let's just slow down, though, once he gets to the NBA and let him develop. He was only a sophomore. Still very, very young. I think going to be a very good NBA player.
All right, Sixers head coach Brett Brown signed a contract extension yesterday amidst all the Twitter stuff. Brown has been the head coach in Philly since 2013. Sixers were 52-30 this year with him. Nick, good move for Philly?
I think it is. I think that he's proven himself as, at the very least, an above-average NBA coach. Those are hard to come by. I know that people thought he got out-coached by Brett Stevens in the second round of the playoffs, but that's not enough for me to not want him back. And in the NBA, you don't have coaches on lame duck years. He had 1 year left, so you either fire him or you extend him. I think they made the right choice.
They made the right choice, and you can see it in their players. Are their younger players developing? Yes, you got to give the coach credit. This is a great defensive team. It's hard to get NBA players to play defense. He has them playing great defense in Philadelphia with a young team. Yes, let's move on with him. I believe he is the guy on the sideline when they win a championship.
All right, finally, both Andre Iguodala and Kevin Love's status for Game 1 still unknown. Love remains in the concussion protocol while Iggy is still rehabbing from a knee injury he suffered in Game 3. Chris, which player is more important to his team's success in the finals?
I mean, my goodness, how many times Kevin Love going to be the answer to a question? I mean, what is LeBron going to do without him? I mean, they don't have a bench. You bring Jeff Green off their bench as a starter. No, they need Kevin Love. Golden State's a small team. Kevin Love should be made for playing against the Warriors. But, I mean, even if he does play, he's a liability defensively. I mean, they're going to pick, switch until they get Kevin Love in the situation, and then they're going to yo-yo him to death for 4 games. So Kevin Love is the most important. The only way this series can be extended is if Kevin Love has a great series.
What's so interesting about your answer, because I agree with you, by the way, Iggy's the 5th most important player on the Warriors and Love's the 2nd most important player on the Cavs. So to me, it's a simple answer, but you answered Kevin Love instantly, and is it fair to say Kevin Love's the guy since LeBron's gone back to Cleveland that has been most frustrating for you, that's been most disappointing for you? After watching him in Minnesota, after seeing the player, because I know you have ties to that franchise because of your time with the Vikings, like seeing who he was as a Timberwolf and seeing who he's been with or without Kyrie as a Cav.
Right. It's one of those free agency things that now you get a guy on your team and you watch him 82 games and you realize, wow, he's not that guy. But it's also, anytime you get a player who's dominant on a losing team, you need to be aware of what you're getting, because most of the time you're not getting 25 and 12. You're getting the best player in a losing situation. A lot of the games are out of hand, so he can build those big stats. But how good of a basketball player is he when he plays with other great players? And to me, that was Kevin Love coming from Minnesota, going to the Cavs. Not athletic. You wonder, how did he get all those rebounds? Wow, he's not as athletic as I thought he would be. I thought he would be a better shooter than he would, especially playing with the type of shooters that he's playing with. I mean, I thought that you could rely on Kevin Love to occasionally give you a 30-point game,
right,
like a 15-point quarter. No, and they run, especially the first quarters, in 4 years, they run most of the offense through Kevin Love. They give him an opportunity to get started and get a fast start more than any other player on Cleveland's roster. So very disappointed in Kevin Love and what I've seen.
Can I give Kevin Love just a little bit of leeway? Think about the year that he had. He had the whole mental breakdown and came out and talked about his mental illness. He had the broken hand. He had a concussion. He got banged around and knocked around a lot. Does any of that factor into his production now?
It would factor in if we hadn't seen the 3 years prior. I would, if this was an outlier year and you're like, oh, okay, he dealt with the loss of his grandmother, he talked about mental health publicly, he broke his hand, and now he's in with a concussion. That, if it were an outlier year, then yes, it would. The problem is Kevin Love's been on the trade block since the moment he got to Cleveland. Why? Because he's underachieved. Because you got to remember, when LeBron went back there, Kevin Love was a more established star in this league than Kyrie Irving was. Both of those guys were guys who would put up big numbers on bad teams, but Love had been an All-NBA player. Kyrie hadn't. Like, Love had done more in this league. Kyrie ascended. Kyrie took advantage of the time with LeBron as well as any Robin to his Batman could have. Kevin Love didn't. He had the harder role as the third option, but then this year, when he was second option, except for those first 20 games of the year, he never got to being the guy that we think his talent dictates that he could have been.
Yeah, I'm not in the business of making excuses. I mean, we can make a list of excuses for every pro athlete if we want to. It's about, do you get the job done? That's what they pay you for. It's not college. It's not high school. It's professional, and the expectations are of that. Kevin Love has not delivered that in Cleveland. I think if Kevin Love was being honest with himself, Kevin Love would feel the same way. At this point in his career, you would think Kevin Love would be a better basketball player than what he is.
All right, let's move on to the Rockets now. Still licking their wounds after a Game 7 loss to Golden State. They have some interesting decisions to make in the near future, but Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta might have inadvertently given us a little nugget or two. Says Houston must re-sign Chris Paul and wants to keep Clint Capella, who'll be a restricted free agent this summer. But keep in mind, if they do both, it'll be difficult to sign a guy named LeBron James. Chris, I'll start with you. Would the Rockets be making the right move bringing back the same team next year?
Well, to me, I'm concerned about Chris Paul. I'm concerned about any guard that gets into his 30s, undersized guards in the NBA. They probably have the shortest shelf life of great players. If you say, okay, now I'm going to get an aging player. You want a point guard, a two guard, a three, a four, a five. The least, number 5, would be the point guard. All right, that's the guy, he wears out quick in his career. They lose their legs. That's why we're worried about Kyrie. They're in Boston with the multiple knee surgeries that he's had. So I'm concerned about Chris Paul being tied to him for the next 4 or 5 years. Because if you have an aging Chris Paul, you have Harden as your two guard or a point guard. So how good can you be defensively? How good is Chris Paul going to be as a defensive stopper? Now, he can be a spot-up shooter, but you can't be a defensive stopper but for so long. And you got Harden. So for me, how close are they to Golden State if they can't get better defensively at the point guard? So I'm concerned about that. I would try to go after LeBron. I wouldn't try to bring this team back as it is. I would try to bring back LeBron as a piece of this team. And if I couldn't get LeBron, I would try to bring it back as close as I can. You get into a situation with Capella, a lot like Tristan Thompson was a couple years ago, where you have a certain amount of synergy, not only in this locker room, but the way they play basketball. And he has benefited from being with Harden, starting to learn the system. He's only getting better. Is he worth a max contract? I don't think he's worth a max contract. Would he take less than that to stay in Houston? That would be what I would be trying to do, and I believe that's what's on their books to try to get done.
The number one option would be and is, and I believe the Rockets are trying to set this into motion as soon as the season ends, getting LeBron James. The number one option is to get LeBron. If they get LeBron, they will be bringing back Chris Paul.
Wait, can they afford LeBron? First things first.
Well, listen, they can't. It will be almost impossible to keep Capella, CP3, and LeBron.
Okay.
But Capella would be the odd man out in that scenario. LeBron and Chris Paul are super
do
close
you
friends.
need a center in the West, though?
Right.
That's why you can let Capella go.
Okay.
And so their number one objective, I believe, before this year, during this year, was to try to add LeBron James when it looked like, the Cavs are a mess. Like, is he potentially on the trade block? Certainly this offseason is to go get LeBron James. I believe that the Rockets felt at one point this year they would be the favorites this summer to get LeBron James. The only LeBron complicating factor is this. The last time LeBron had a free agent decision, he took forever on it.
But he didn't make it dramatic, so that was good.
Well, listen, he took forever on it.
Free agency opens July 1st.
Right.
And I think he did the first deal July 9th and the next deal July 10th.
I can't remember the first deal, but the next deal, the one to go back to Cleveland, you're exactly right. He waited a week and a half. And all of NBA free agency was in a freeze because you had deals. The Cavs had Gordon Hayward agreed to terms. But like, we can't sign you yet because we got to keep this cap space open for LeBron. So that's the complicating factor. As far as people might think, Tillman Fertitta, Daryl Morey can't like that you're telling the world we have to bring Chris Paul back. Listen, Chris Paul does not agree to the trade that he agreed to go to Houston unless technically this is against the NBA rules, but this happens. There is an agreement in place because he turned down an extension from the Clippers in order to go to Houston. There is an agreement in place. We are going to give you a max extension on the back end of this. Now, is that concerning long term? Absolutely. If they do that, that is because they feel, you know what? The number you kept pointing out that I brought up the 65 wins, Chris. The other number I brought up was 53-7 this year, 50-5 going into the Warriors series with CP3, Harden, and Capella. Obviously, they didn't have CP3 the final two games. They believe this core can win a championship, but the concerns about how many games are you going to get from a healthy Chris Paul, that's a real one, and you just got to roll the dice with it.
And if LeBron decides to play with Chris Paul in Houston, is LeBron in the same situation he was in with D. Wade? A guy is one of his best friends. They come into the league together. They're very, very close. But LeBron was not happy with how many games D. Wade missed at the end of his Miami career.
Correct.
And that's one of the reasons why he left Miami. He couldn't depend on Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh didn't like playing the five. He was playing out of position. We didn't know Chris Bosh was going to get sick and everything afterwards, but he was concerned about D. Wade and D. Wade's knees and his inability to play potentially 70 games a year.
With what you saw from the Rockets, knowing that they probably could have beaten, if they wanted to, if they had Chris Paul, could have beaten the Warriors. Do you think they could come back with the same group next year and do it? I mean, if they
Absolutely.
don't get LeBron, you have no problem with having to add anything?
But Jen is asking, if they bring it back, could they beat the Warriors? And my answer is absolutely. They could. Now, they had a perfect storm this year. The Warriors dealt with injuries during the regular season, which allowed the Rockets to secure the 1 seed more easily. But no matter who they bring back, unless they get LeBron, you want to know what the key to the Rockets offseason is? Figuring out how James Harden can go a tick above. It is not a coincidence that James Harden's 3 best games of the playoffs were the 3 game ones of each series, when he had the most days off leading into it. It is not a coincidence that James Harden faltered down the stretch of these playoff games and down the stretch of these series. Part of that's the workload, but part of that also is, of all the true superstars in the league, LeBron, KD, Steph, Russ, Giannis, Anthony Davis, Harden, those 7 guys, let's be fair, who's in, do you think, the worst shape? Who has the least endurance? Who has the least cardiovascular strength? Now, Harden has a very heavy workload, and I'm not saying he's out of shape, but by NBA superstar standards, he could tick it up a level. That's up to him this offseason.
Yeah, I don't consider him to have a heavy workload because most of all what he's doing, he's playing in the high pick and roll. All he's doing is dribbling the ball. That's not strenuous. Because if you're a two-way player playing defense and everything, like that's not as strenuous as some of the other things the superstars are doing. He needs to be in better shape. All right, if he wants to be an elite player, and the reason why we never consider, is he the second best player in the world? We never even talk about Harden, and that's one of the reasons.
All right, let's take a break. Coming up, let's talk some football. Here's a loaded question. Can Brandon Marshall help fix the Seahawks offense next season? Yes, the same Brandon Marshall you're thinking. Is it the same Brandon Marshall? Yes. Next on First Things First. Back to First Things First. Head coach Eric Mangini is here, which means one thing: football's right around the corner. Good to have you, Coach. Also,
Good to see you,
You're
Coach.
here all
How are
year,
you?
but it just felt like something to say.
Right around the corner. Right around the corner.
It.
It's during the season or the day after the Super Bowl. Whatever it is, Coach is here.
Coach, it's actually 99 days till we start the season.
What's the first line in my script?
Oh, what is it? He can't read that. In 99 short days, the NFL season starts.
Someone give me a different script now. I have to read someone else's
Okay, they
script.
put one in for you.
Let's talk about the Seahawks.
Sometimes with your mouth, you can say 100. They won't know.
Seriously. Bad math. It's not the end of the world.
I got your code.
You still have a great personality. Seahawks signed a one-year deal with wide receiver Brandon Marshall. Entering year 13, the six-time Pro Bowler missed 11 games last year after undergoing ankle surgery. He posted the following picture in a Seahawks fan shirt on the IG Instagram saying, "Always wanted to play in front of these fans." At Seahawks. Coach, I'll start with you. Is Brandon Marshall a good fit with Seattle?
Well, I don't know how well he's going to fit in. I think it's a good opportunity for him, and I think it's a good opportunity for Seattle. One thing I've always liked about Pete Carroll is he'll churn the roster, and he'll take chances on guys to see where they are. And Brandon Marshall is one of those guys. A couple years ago, close to 100 or maybe even 100 receptions.
109 yards, 109 catches, 1,500 yards.
Yeah, so he's not that far removed from it. I like the when I've talked to Brandon Marshall, when I've heard him talk on TV and about his sort of journey through the NFL, it strikes me as a guy that has matured, that has recognized his weaknesses, and that's encouraging to me too.
Is that what got him a job in Seattle? Because that's the one thing Dez Bryant hasn't done. And Brandon Marshall is older. He's less productive. He's not exactly a great fit with the Seahawks, and yet he's employed.
Well, it's what you're looking for. So if you're a head coach or GM and you have a guy who's historically had problems, and look, Brandon's been with 6 teams prior to this, you want to be able to see some type of growth, and you want to see real growth because you know that he has the potential athletically, and you know that he can be a big factor in the red zone. The question is, what's the human being going to be like when you bring him into the locker room? What kind of effect is he going to have? And so I was always had been recently encouraged by where Brandon is mentally and where he is from a behavior perspective.
Yeah, I don't think it's really fair to compare guys that are in different economical categories. All right, even though they play the same position, both of them are very physical. Both of them will play to the boundary. Both of them will play the X receiver.
You're talking Dez and Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, absolutely, because Dez is younger. Dez's contract demands are higher.
Dez isn't signing for 1 year, $2 million.
Yeah, he wasn't even on the radar for Seattle. So to think that Dez was a better fit in Seattle, no, he wasn't a fit because economically they couldn't fit him under the cap. They have Doug Baldwin there as their number 1 guy. There's also a theory with Dez. He still thinks he's the number 1 guy. So you can't bring that plus the demands from a salary standpoint into the locker room. The thing I'm concerned about with Brandon, and he's had a remarkable career. I'm very familiar with Brandon, more so than anyone else on TV. And the reason why I was a little bit hesitant in saying that is because, man, I have never seen a kid go through as many things as Brandon Marshall has gone through. I met him when he was a junior, when George O'Leary at Central Florida had decided he was going to move him from safety to wide receiver. So they had Brandon come stay with me in the summer in Boca Raton. So I've been knowing Brandon since he was a kid. So I had him there. We switched him over. His wide receiver coach was DJ McCarthy, one of my best friends from South Florida, one of the great coaches in college football as far as wide receivers. We got him switched over. Got him drafted. We all through the years in Denver, man, all the things he went through off the field. Like he had just left my house the time he got into the incident with his girlfriend and was arrested for. He had just left my house and got on the plane going to Denver. So remarkable. Seattle is hard to play because they practice so hard. They've been fined by the NFL.
They lost draft picks.
Yeah, lost draft picks because they've broken the rules in the offseason. And Brandon's a workout warrior, but it's hard with his knees to practice as hard as Seattle practices. I believe he can make it through training camp. I believe he's a great fit for them emotionally, what they want from their players, what they expect from their players. And the players they have on that roster, I think they will gravitate to Brandon and who he is now.
So one quick point of note, or point of order here. He's not guaranteed to make this football team. Like, people should understand that. When we hear...
That's why I said make it through training
Right, make
camp.
it through. Like, he could make the football team. I would say he's likely to make the football team, but it's far from a guarantee. When it's a one-year deal worth up to $2 million, the guarantees are likely right around $1 million or less. They could move on from...
Yeah, he's got the veteran minimum as his contract, and then
With
he's got
some
incentives in there that he can get
it.
the... Yes, he's probably got about $700,000 to $900,000 in incentives.
But his story is one that a lot of football players or just viewers can learn from. Because he was a guy, I obviously didn't see, you'd never told me that. I didn't know he had lived with you. But he's a guy that if you followed him from afar, seemed to be one of the NFL's bad guys. Like, he did. When we didn't know he was dealing with the borderline personality disorder and the mental health issues, he had a multitude of family violence and domestic violence incidents. He was a guy that looked like was going to, when he was at the peak of his powers athletically.
And that wasn't make-believe.
Right.
That wasn't sensationalized. That wasn't people making up stuff. And all those things happen.
And so for you to say, Coach, now, like, that he can be a locker room leader, a guy you bring in even if his talent isn't at the level, that is because he got his life in order. He figured out what he was dealing with from a brain chemistry standpoint, and he's become an outspoken advocate for mental health in sports. And to see a reinvention of that from the person he was, to use the word you use, that's remarkable to me. And it is a lesson for guys that your story's not written till it's written, because the old Brandon, the previous version of Brandon Marshall would never be a guy who could play in year 13 as a mediocre talent at this stage of his career because of his age, because he's a good locker room presence. He was considered the opposite of that a half-decade ago.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to make the Seattle team just based on his locker room presence. But the fact that he's gone through what he's gone through, and the fact that he can bring that knowledge and that experience to a locker room, because there's a lot of guys on teams that are going through difficult things. And as much as you may want to help as an organization or as a coach or as a GM, sometimes the best assistance comes from other people who have experienced that, and guys that can share their journey with him in the locker room. So I'm cheering for him. I hope it works out there. I think that he can still contribute in a meaningful way to a team based off of he's not that far removed from being really productive. It'd be curious to see how he fits in Brian Schottenheimer's system, but could potentially be a great fit.
Okay, Brandon Marshall aside, if he doesn't make this team, what does the Seattle offense have to do this year just to improve on what they did last year?
Well, in facing Seattle's offense over the years, sometimes they have to get out, not sometimes, a lot of times they have to get out of their own way.
Yes.
There's a ton, historically, there's been a ton of self-inflicted wounds where they get a good drive going, they're moving the ball, and then there's a false start, followed by another false start, or there's a holding penalty. Start there. Start by not losing the game, and then you can really work on winning the game. The numbers weren't bad overall offensively last year. That, to me, would be the biggest component, though, is taking care of those self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, they have to be able to help Russell Wilson out. And that's from a frontline standpoint. Can they create a running game? Since Marshawn Lynch, they have not had a consistent running game. We know they lost Jimmy Graham. We know they lost Richardson, their speed guy. So they need playmakers. But it starts with being able to help Russell Wilson out. Now, they make enough big plays, but Russell's scrambling for his life. They end up in third and long more than most of the good teams that we see. And this defense is aging. They need to be a little more ball control to help out that defense. Defense is a little undersized to keep them fresh.
Quick note on the running game. They spent the draft pick on Rashad Penny. So they hope that that's their best running back since Marshawn Lynch. We know they have Chris Carson, C.J. Prosise, will be the running back core. When you say they rely so much on Russell Wilson, he is the highlights we see of him. He's running around making things happen. But that's also one of the reasons that I can't remember the last year that Russell Wilson wasn't dinged at some point in the year, where we're talking about, oh, Russell's got a turned ankle or he's got a strained hamstring because he's having to do so much. And when you're that reliant on him, if he's not at 100%, that's when you've seen this offense really hit the muck, is when he's unable to operate at full capacity.
And one thing as far as Brandon Marshall, to wrap up that we have concerns about with players, can they learn system? Brandon Marshall has had 6,000-yard seasons with 6 different head coaches, and he's made 5 or 6 Pro Bowls with 5, I think, different quarterbacks. So his ability to be able to adapt is at an elite level, Coach.
Yeah, and just getting back to the Russell Wilson point, sometimes what Russell's going to have to do, too, is stay in the pocket longer. And you're coaching those offensive linemen that the quarterback's going to be in a certain spot. When he starts moving, they don't know where the quarterback is, but the defensive linemen do. Right. So you can give off sacks based off of movement that the O-line doesn't anticipate. So there's got to be that level of discipline, too. And when the plays break down, they break down, and he does what he does. But that's got to work together.
99 days. It's officially 99 days. I spent the whole segment counting in my head.
Wow.
I counted them all.
Impressed
in my
you got
head.
that high.
I did. Well, I stopped at 70, and Dusty said, it's 99. We'll just speed up. Coach, we'll see you a little bit later in the show. Coming up, back to LeBron James. Is he heading to the 76ers? Ben Simmons chimes in next on First Things. Welcome back to the show. NBA champ Antoine Walker is here. Antoine, a bevy of basketball topics to break down with you today. Not since Waldo have we been so consumed with where someone is or where someone will be. LeBron James is in Cleveland, but where he will be is still way up in the air. Questions as he enters his 4th straight finals against the Warriors. According to Las Vegas, the 76ers are the favorites to sign James. Ben Simmons was asked about the possibility of adding LeBron. Take a listen.
Would you like to play with LeBron? A lot of people.
I'll play with him.
That's awesome. You guys are both facilitators. Could you guys coexist at that level?
There's only one way to find out, man.
Well, he's as good as signed. If that's not breaking news,
Ben
I don't know what is.
Thrilled to be ambushed by the TMZ folks in LAX. Just thrilled.
All right, so let's go with the possibility of LeBron going to Philadelphia. Would he be a good fit with the Sixers, Antoine?
Well, first let's start. LeBron would be a good fit anywhere.
True, he'd be a good fit on the show.
Yeah, but I'm not 100% sure about that because they got some pieces over there that could be possibly gone. When you think about J.J. Redick's a free agent, Marco Bellinelli's a free agent. So you're talking about 2 guys that play huge minutes for them. They're guys that can extend the floor, shoot the three-point ball. And when you add LeBron and Ben Simmons, you don't necessarily have the best three-point shooters in the world, even though LeBron has improved his three-point shot. And I don't know how good Ben Simmons would be without the ball in his hand. So I'm not necessarily saying that's a great match, them two together. I like Embiid. And if you're LeBron, you're going to a team to try to beat Golden State.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's the team that can beat Golden State.
Here's where I disagree with you on it. Because sometimes when we talk about fit, we only think about one side of the ball, the offensive side of the ball. And if LeBron on that team defensively against Golden State, Embiid's one of the true 7-footers in this league. He can stay on the court against Golden State because he moves his feet so well. Ben Simmons can guard. Listen, nobody guards Kevin Durant, but he's at least the size and strength to where you could throw him at him. And LeBron, when you have Embiid as a rim protector, if LeBron can play that rover position on defense where he is
on Draymond,
now all of a sudden you present a lot of defensive problems for them. And if we are comparing them to Golden State, man, nowhere to hide Steph size-wise. Like if they go small, Embiid can punish you. And reportedly, LeBron, as he continues to evolve in different phases of his career, he is open to being off the ball at his next stop. And I think that's because if he's looking at Houston or Philly, he would have to be off the ball more because of who they have on their team and playing a more traditional small forward role.
I disagree. He's not going to agree to getting off the ball. He can't play off the ball. LeBron James is a guy that has to have the ball in his hands. Kyrie Irving, he still dominated the ball, probably 60-40 with Kyrie. He's not going to just come off the ball. That's where he's at his best. He's a pick-and-roll guy. He likes to come off the pick-and-roll. He's not a guy that can spot up and just shoot three-pointers. So I think it's hard-pressed to think LeBron James is going to come off the ball at this point in his career, especially at the level that he's playing at right now. He's playing at a very, very high level, and he needs the ball in his hand to be effective. I just don't see that. I do like the situation for Philly because they got some young players. LeBron needs to be around some youth. He cannot continue to extend the energy that he's extending.
Yeah, he's got to play a lot less minutes.
And throughout the regular season, I think what he did this year was obviously a miracle. It was incredible. It's all credit to him and his conditioning. But to ask him to continue to do that in years 16, 17, 18 is going to be impossible.
Where do you think, then, he would be a better fit?
Now, you're going to think I'm crazy. But if I was him, if I'm going to Boston. I'm going to Boston. Yeah, I'm going to Boston. I mean, Kevin Durant did it.
Yes.
Kevin Durant joined the best, and if the best team in the Eastern Conference right now would be the Boston Celtics.
I like it.
I will figure out a way to get to Boston if I'm LeBron James.
Wow.
And even the playing field.
Nick, what you gonna do?
Well, I mean, do you
Nick and I
think
are
he
gonna
would?
be
Well,
best
hold on.
friends.
Do you think Kyrie would still be there?
If I'm Danny Ainge, I'm taking a shot at him. I want to even the playing field. If LeBron James is free, I want to even the playing field. And that's how you even the playing field.
That's an interesting one. Now, they would have a glut of forwards that when I say you would have to trade one of your max contracts. The people would say Kyrie, but the better max contract trade would be Gordon Hayward, right? Like, I mean,
with Tatum and them,
right,
Gordon
with
Hayward,
Tatum and
yes.
then Gordon Hayward would be the one you move.
I mean, God bless you, poor guy. I mean, but you got to go.
What? Oh, Gordon Hayward?
Gordon Hayward got to
absolutely.
go. Like, I'm keeping Jalen. I'm keeping Tatum because, man, you need them young thoroughbreds to be able to run that court. And you talk about, listen.
Kyrie would be so mad.
But you got to
Nick Wright would be so happy.
But you got to think, he can get out the East. Look how he got out the East with what he had right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So imagine now if it's about winning titles and it's about chasing Michael Jordan.
Wow.
Go join the best.
Have him on my list.
One thing
Join the best.
Yeah, because I don't believe there's a perfect fit anywhere. If you go to Houston, you still have some of the same concerns as far as the ball. You still have same concerns as far as some of the age. LeBron told me he was about winning and winning championships. And I didn't like what I saw with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons going against Boston, where they were the favorite. So if I was to pick a group that was winners, now you got my attention. I'd much rather go with the young group of Boston, the winners, compared to Folk. He only played a half season in college. Ben Simmons couldn't even get his team at LSU into the NCAA. Joel Embiid didn't play at Kansas. So what has that group of players won, and will Markel's jump shot come back to where it was?
And will Ben Simmons ever get one?
Well,
right?
I watched Draymond Green play right now. Draymond shot the ball better as a rookie than Ben Simmons is shooting the ball. Now, we just assume Ben Simmons is going to learn how to shoot the ball. We see Draymond right now in year what? They leave him wide open. So I just don't. Shooting the ball, man, is hard, okay? He can't shoot the ball at all right now. And to try to get that type of skill, I just don't give that to a player.
Here's the thing when it comes to LeBron's decision. When KD was making his decision, there was only one place he could go that he would be vehemently criticized for. If he had gone to D.C., his hometown, people would have been fine with it. If he had stayed in OKC, people would have been fine with it. Boston, when they recruited him, Miami, when they recruited him, there was one place he would go he'd get vilified for. I feel like LeBron's almost in the opposite situation. If LeBron stays in Cleveland, people will say he doesn't want to win. He knows he can't win with these guys. If he goes to the Lakers, people will say, man, it's more about your brand than about basketball. If he goes to Houston, people will say, oh, so you're joining a 65-win team with an MVP. That reminds me something like what Kevin Durant did. Philly's the one team, and I hadn't thought about Boston. Boston, I have to wrap my mind around it fully. Philly's the one team that is on the listed Vegas odds as the 4 favorites where there's the least amount of criticism. Because Philly wasn't great this year. Because Philly doesn't have an MVP on the team. Because Philly doesn't have a guy or doesn't have the high-level playoff success. And because people would look at them and say, as good as people think Boston is, if LeBron went to Philly, Philly becomes the favorites in the East. At least to me, even with Gordon and Kyrie coming back to Boston.
It's hard to go against LeBron not being a favorite in the East, even with Boston 100% healthy. Because he took a team. You know, the team that he had right now is probably equal, even with Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward out, was probably equal. LeBron didn't have much help. He played Game 7 without Kevin Love and was still able to pull this off. But you also got to look at, too, for LeBron James and his legacy. If it's about winning championships, you stay in the East. I know everybody gets excited about Houston and going out West, but that means for tough first-round matchups, second-round matchups, even just to get to the Western Conference Final. There's no guarantee you're going to get to the championship going through the West. So through the East is the best way if it's about winning championships. I just think do what Kevin Durant did. Go join the best. If you want to win championships and Boston's going to be the team everybody said they're going to be over the next couple years, you join the best.
You're a smart man, Antoine.
Kyrie.
Don't let him tell you otherwise.
I like it. You brought something to the party
See
today.
you a little bit later on in the show. Coming up, can Odell lead the Giants to a bounce-back season next on First Take?
Man, we ain't even talking.
Giants entering week 2 of OTAs, looking for a bounce-back season from a number of players, basically all of them, really, including fourth-year wide receiver Odell Beckham, who missed most of the 2017 season with an ankle injury. Head coach Pat Shurmur says Odell Beckham is pretty close to being medically cleared. He missed yesterday's OTAs, but had been present last week, just not as a full participant. CeCe, how much of the Giants' success rides on OBJ?
It doesn't ride on OBJ. As a wide receiver, let's look at his first 3 years in the league. We haven't had a wide receiver that was more productive in those first 3 years in NFL history. What did it get him? Nothing. Got him one appearance in the playoffs. They lost to Green Bay. Wide receiver didn't play well. A group of wide receivers played even worse. So it's not. The team's success is not predicated on one superstar wide receiver. If we look at the best receivers around the league, we won't ask this about Pittsburgh. Antonio Brown, what do you expect from him this year? I expect him to get about 12 touchdowns, 1,400 yards, but it's not tied into the Pittsburgh Steelers. Julio Jones, what do you expect him to get? 1,350, 1,400 yards, about 7 touchdowns. Julio don't score as much. What about the Falcons? I expect them to win double-digits game, but it's not predicated on a wide receiver. Right. They have to be generate productivity from their offensive line. They have to be more physical. That starts with Nate Solder, the left tackle. That starts with their running back, Barkley, who they drafted. They have to establish a physicality as a Giants team that they are not a passing team, to be able to help Odell out as far as coverage and to be able to help that defense out. Ball control, and big plays. I believe he's going to have a great season, but there's so many other question marks about that defense, offensive line, and can he touch the ball 25 times a game in the NFL?
All right, so if you're not so into the idea that the Giants' success is predicated on what Odell Beckham Jr. can do, what about this? How much of Eli's success is predicated on Odell? Because in the last 5 years, the 2 bad years Eli's had was the year before Odell got there and last year, the year without Odell. Now, I understand last year there were some extenuating circumstances, but where we've seen no quarterback's numbers have a larger discrepancy throwing to one guy than throwing to anyone else he's thrown to than Eli when he's targeting Odell and Eli when he's targeting everyone else. In Eli's career, when he's targeting Odell, a 110 quarterback rating. When he's targeting everyone else, an 83 quarterback rating. So would you buy into that for Eli to have a good year, Odell has to have a great year?
They have to build a block for Eli, man. It's not about Odell and Eli. It's about the rest of that team. They have not been able to run the ball in the last 5 years for the Giants.
Right, but so that's my question, though. Since it's not like the running game was great 2 years ago, but the offense was competent. Eli was better. It's not like the offensive line was much better 2 years ago, but the difference was with or without Odell for Eli. Does that track to you at all?
I think that we put too much of an emphasis on OBJ, what he's going to do. If the Giants are going to get to the playoffs, these are the things that have to happen. Their offensive line has to be drastically better. Their overall mentality as an offense, they have to be a physical offense, all right? Then generate the big plays off of that to help out a defense that it is highly paid, but they didn't play to that way last year. Their defense, they got to get back to sacks and turnovers. I haven't mentioned OBJ or Eli yet. This football team has a lot of question marks about them, and it's just not Eli. Eli's got to be supported by the rest of this team.
Let me ask you a question about Odell Beckham Jr. So it was impressive. He showed up for OTAs. He's still working without a contract. He hasn't been a full participant
yet. He's working without a contract.
He's working without a contract
working under his old contract. Yep.
Hasn't been a full participant because he's still finishing up his rehab process. Once he does and he gets to 100% and he's allowed to go full tilt, do you guys have any concerns of him coming in and giving 100% in OTAs without that new contract?
Well, they won't let him go, even when he's.
They won't let him go 100%?
Before his injuries, one of the reasons he talked about not liking to go to OTAs last year was they don't let him compete the way he wants to compete. That was before he had the injury issues. So I don't think it will have how the Giants use him. Now, there's a new head coach.
Yeah, they got a whole new regime now.
So that could be different.
And Odell and the coach have worked on and talked about the things they had a problem with before. He's going to do what other players are doing at OTAs. For one, I don't give a guy credit for doing what normally you're supposed to do.
For showing up.
Yeah, he showed up OTAs. You're excited. That's what he's supposed to do. All right? He does have a contract. All right? They don't have to give him an extension. Him being at OTAs is going to help and enhance going forward because they're going to give him a contract extension.
All right, we'll take a break. Leave it there. Coming up, can the Cavs keep the finals competitive? Next on First Things First. Finally, Andre Iguodala hurt his knee in Game 3 after colliding with James Harden. Iggy's coach, Steve Kerr, said the Warriors would have beaten the Rockets in 5 games if Iggy was healthy. You agree with Steve Kerr, Nick?
No. And I think this is a wild comment to make to me. Andre Iguodala is your 5th best player and a guy who was not in your starting lineup most of the year, has not been in the starting lineup the majority of your tenure there. And if they had lost this series, and in the post-mortem of the season, he wanted to say, you know, I think we could have pulled out one more game had Andre not been hurt. You know, it was a tough injury for us in that regard. But I almost flippantly disregard what the Rockets did. And the way, let's keep in mind how the Rockets won Game 4 and 5. It's not because they scored 125 points.
No.
They shut down the Warriors offensively in the fourth quarters, particularly of Games 4 and Games 5. Andre Iguodala is not an offensive force. He's out there for his defense. Like, oh, well, Quinn Cook missed that open 3. Quinn Cook's a far better three-point shooter than Andre Iguodala. If Iggy would have been out there, like, no, I don't. Listen, Iggy's loss was somewhat significant as the 5th best guy on your team can be. But no, I don't buy into these comments by Steve Kerr.
It's a game of matchups, and you have Kevon Looney, who ended up playing extended minutes with Iggy being hurt, and they are not nearly. Now, he did a good job for him. And all the switches with him playing on the perimeter, I mean, he did a phenomenal job for a young, big player, not used to playing. He adjusted well. But they're a lot better team with Iggy out there. It's just one of those comments. As tight as this series was, because it boiled down to one quarter. The third quarter of game number 6 and the third quarter of game number 7. So in a tightly contested series like that, you don't expect one of the coaches to make a comment that's saying, well, we would have beat them 4-1.
Right.
Do you think he was being dismissive towards the Rockets or just trying to make his guy?
He said we would have won the series in 5.
Yeah, well, Iggy's, we don't know if he's going to play in game number 1, so why would we be trying to pump him up? All right, you could pump him up without making Houston look bad. You can be like, listen, this guy's invaluable to the team. We don't believe this series would have been like it was if we don't have Iggy. When he put the number on it, that's when he threw shade at the Rockets.
And I'm going to add one other thing. You know what the Warriors don't want? And obviously you can't do this, but they don't want this series played with both teams at full strength. Because that doesn't just mean Chris Paul plays Game 6 and 7. That means the Rockets version of Andre Iguodala, Luke Richard Mbah a Moute, is playable as he was in the regular season. He was the Rockets' 5th most important player this year. He was their defensive wing that was a shooting liability. He became unplayable in these playoffs because he never got over that shoulder injury. Like, you don't want to do these hypotheticals if we were both fully healthy, especially when you ended up winning the series anyway.
He was unlucky, though, because I put the jinx on him.
Oh.
Luke
Richard, the moment you said his name right, he couldn't play. You're so proud of yourself.
Yeah. As soon as I did that, his game fell apart. So I'm going to go back to speaking the way I was speaking before.
Back then, his name was Nick. What's his name?
What's that?
What do you call that guy? Your guy, Luke Richard?
Hey, anyone out there having a birthday this week, please, I'd ask if you wouldn't mind using your birthday wish on a competitive NBA final series. I know it's a tall order. I know birthday wishes are hard to come by these days. I've got 2 kids, trust me. Warriors, Cavs, Part 4. Someone who isn't expecting these games to be close, broadcaster and former head coach Jeff Van Gundy. He says any game the Cavs win would be a huge upset and added, this is the biggest difference that I remember between 2 teams heading into the finals in my time in the NBA, and we know that is a long time. Thanks for sugarcoating it. CC, is Jeff Van Gundy right?
Big facts. All facts. And I used to work for that company. I know he probably got a memo saying, hey, you're telling a little bit too much of the truth to the public. Hey, can we shade this a little bit the other way?
The finals are on ABC, which is owned by the same company.
Yeah, and those TV deals like that, they don't start making money till game 5, 6, and 7, where that back end of it becomes all profit. So Van Gundy, I appreciate his honesty. He's telling the truth. This is the way it is. LeBron and the others versus one of the greatest teams that we've ever seen. In 4 games, they're going to get rings for the 3rd time in 4 years. Now, what team have we seen do that wasn't considered one of the greatest teams in NBA history? So that's what they are on the cusp of doing. So, no, he sees it exactly the way we see it. Steve Kerr said it. In game number 7, You know something? Our talent kicked in. It ain't about no strategy. They have more talent than anyone in the NBA, and it's not even close.
Listen, I'm not calling it a sweep, but I'd be surprised if it goes 6. I'd be shocked if it goes 7. And it would be the most surprising sports result of my lifetime if the Cavs win this series. And I say that believing the greatest player ever plays for Cleveland. That is where the team aspect of basketball kicks in. Like, I understand that in basketball, one player can affect a result much more than in football, more than in baseball, except maybe if it's your starting pitcher who's just lights out.
If the team gets him in position.
Gets him in position. Where you can't win a game 0-0, so a starting pitcher's ability can be limited. Hockey, I guess, a super hot goalie. But we know NBA superstar is the most valuable asset in sports. And the Cavs have a superstar of all superstars. The problem is, and I thought C made a great illustration of this yesterday or the day before, which is after LeBron, who, if they were all free agents, how many names down the list do we have to go between the two teams being combined before you take a Cav? It goes LeBron, then it goes KD, then it goes Steph, then it goes Clay, then it goes Draymond, then it goes Iggy, then it goes, at that point, does it go Kevin Love?
You take Kevin Love before Iggy.
Oh, because of the injury. You take Kevin Love before Iggy?
No, you take him before that if they're healthy.
Okay, even at health.
Yeah, even
the way Kevin
healthy,
Love's been playing,
I mean, he's in my doghouse, but I'm going to give him that.
Okay, so we would have to go down 4. But then after Kevin Love, there's not another name you take. You take Iggy, you take Kevon Looney, you take David West. Then maybe Tristan Thompson?
Well, this is the thing. The biggest problem with the Cavs is not only LeBron, Kevin Love, but after that in this draft, I might take Jeff Green as far as the next Cav to go compared to Tristan, because you're playing against the West. How valuable are they? So, I mean, you're way, way down in no man's land. Guys aren't going to play 8th, 9th, 10th on the roster.
And here's why, because people might say, well, there was this finals between these two teams with a similar situation, 2015. When Kyrie got hurt in Game 1, Kevin Love was out for the series. No one's taking Delly or Mozgov over who the Warriors have. In that series, Cavs were up 2-1. That series went 6. What's the difference? The difference is that series, forget that Kevin Durant wasn't there. Leave that out for a moment. The Cavs had the personnel to play a 1993 Knicks style of basketball, meaning we're going to slow it down.
The same way they won Game 7 against the Celtics.
Yes, we're going to slow it down. We're going to play, except in that series, they were playing great defense. Against the Celtics are just missing shots.
Just to stop. Yes.
Just missing shots.
Yes.
The Cavs do not have the roster to say, we're going to try to keep this game where the possessions are in the 70s. LeBron holds the ball for 22 seconds, jacks up a shot, and then we lock you down defensively. They don't have the guys to lock you down.
Okay, if they don't have the roster to do it, give me a game plan, something they can at least work towards to keep this close. They have to have some kind of strategy going in. There's got to be something that they're going to hold their head on and say, well, this is what we're going to ride through the finals. It's going to be this. Because it can't be what they've been doing. It can't be prayer.
This is what the Cavs, now, they're fortunate they're playing against the Warriors because the Warriors turn the ball over. But LeBron cannot average 5-6 turnovers a game. Yeah. They have to be. You never, it's just too easy to say, oh, you have to play a perfect game. You should never say that in any sporting event. They got to play clean games. And they got to be able to get some stops. They got to be able to win the loose balls. They got to be able to pound them in the paint. That's what the Cavs have to do. And that's it. And then try to survive that third quarter.
And LeBron's got to play 45 minutes a game, right? LeBron has to play nearly the entire game. I can tell you what I believe the game plan is going to be in Game 1 and how it will adjust. The game plan in Game 1 will be a typical LeBron Game 1, which is he calls it feeling out. What that really means is, if my guys are hitting shots, we'll have a chance. But other than that, I'm going to see how they're going to be guarding me. And then once the Cavs are likely down 2-0, my guess is in Game 3, that's the game LeBron shoots the ball 35-plus times and tries to will his team to victory by himself. But as great as he is, as much endurance as he has, he can't do that for 7 games against this team. Not when you can have Durant, Draymond, Iggy when he comes back, those bodies to throw at LeBron defensively. It's one of the reasons why Houston was such a better matchup for the Cavs, even though they'd have been heavy underdogs. Houston, since Mbah a Moute wasn't playable, didn't have the personnel to throw at LeBron. Golden State has Draymond, who is built to be thrown at LeBron, and Kevin Durant, who is so much longer than LeBron, he can cause some problems for him. Like, there's just, listen, I'd love to be, there's nothing more I wanted than to be able to come on TV the day after the Warriors won and pick the Cavs. I wanted to. I tried to think of a way to do it, and I couldn't.
12%?
I couldn't.
Vegas gives them 12%.
And that seems high. That's a 1 in 8 chance. That seems a little high.
All right, take a break. Coming up, why is another team passing on Dez? We've asked that question a lot. That's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. Coach Mangini back with us. Thanks for sticking around, Coach. Mainly because it's part of your job, but that's great that you did it. So thank you so much for that.
Good to see you, Coach.
Get to sit back and enjoy all the basketball talk. It's fantastic.
Well, you're welcome.
I'm just learning.
You're welcome, buddy.
It's almost booked that I'm coming to Cleveland for Game 4 a week from Friday.
All right, I'll be out of town. It works out perfectly.
We actually will be out of town.
Unbelievable.
Among players who can still play football but have yet to be signed by a team next season, Chris Carter and Dez Bryant. At this point, both have a seemingly equal chance to play next year.
No, I'm past midlife. I'm done.
Dez still unemployed. Chris has a pretty good job here. First, Dez turned down a contract with the Ravens. Packers passed. Now the 49ers reportedly are not interested. Cowboys CEO Stephen Jones says he's not sure why Dez is unsigned and that multiple teams have called the Cowboys about Dez. Mind you, that team released Dez, the one where he's not sure why nobody would sign him. Coach, are the Niners making a mistake if they pass on Dez Bryant?
No, I don't think so at all. When you look at what the 49ers do with their offense, there's a lot of shifting, there's a lot of motioning, there's a lot of movement, there's multiple formations. They ask those guys to do a lot of different things on a weekly basis, and that really hasn't been something that Dez has done or so you're projecting whether or not he can do it well. And I think they've also done a good job in San Francisco with the receivers that they have. They got Marquise Goodwin. He had a nice season last year after not being very productive in Buffalo. So you see some growth by some of their young receivers. They drafted a young receiver as well, Dante Pettis. More of a punt returner right now, but he's got some serious upside. So it doesn't really make any sense for them, I don't think, at this point, to go get a guy like Dez.
If Dez had no off-the-field issues, no character issues, none of that, could the Niners bring him in just as a guy with a good veteran presence in the locker room? Could you look at that? Would that change your opinion at all as far as what he could fit, how he could fit into this locker room?
Yeah, you're always looking for good veteran presence, but typically, if you're going to go get those guys, the hold the fort type guys, the teacher type guys, they're usually your guys. They're usually guys that you have a history with that you know are going to not only play that role, but play that role very well and support the program, the coaching staff. Bill Parcells always had hold the fort guys, and they have a value.
But Dez is not supposed to be at that part of his career. Brandon Marshall's going into year 13. Like when we talk about him and the money he took and a veteran leader. Dez is going into year 9. Dez is, I understand year 9 by NFL standards, that's older. But as a wide receiver, that could be the tail end of your prime, right? Like your prime would be year 6 to year 9, theoretically, as a wide receiver. I know your career arc was different than most, but I think for most wide receivers, you look at a guy like Julio. He's in the heart of the prime of his career. Julio's, I think, one draft class younger than Dez Bryant. He's not supposed to be there as, even if he didn't have the other stuff, this locker room guy. He's supposed to be there as a productive player, as a guy who can be potentially a number 1 wide receiver. And the only thing that I can think of at this point is his price point must be exorbitant for no team to have publicly gone after him other than Baltimore, and that was on the 3-year deal.
Yeah, I don't think the 49ers are making a mistake because they don't bring Dez Bryant in. Now, I think on paper, looking at wide receivers, looking at guys they have, who can be a number 1, who can be a number 2. They don't have a number 2. Now, they can believe in Goodwin as much. They reward him with a contract this offseason. He was more productive there than he was in Buffalo. But he's a speed guy. All right? He's a track guy, has blazing speed, and we just don't see guys like that in the NFL be very, very successful. We don't see them being able to be dependable week in and week out. They get knocked around with the physicality. And just because Dez is a physical receiver, I don't believe they're making a mistake. If you're trying to run an offense that I believe that Kyle Shanahan is running, you have to have guys who are smart, guys who can play several positions, guys that bring more roster value compared to every team doesn't need locker room guys. Like, we always have the question, hey, man, is this guy a good locker room guy? You know what we need? We need some good freaking football players. I'll worry about the locker room stuff later on. Is he good enough to be able to take the chance at this point in his career? The 49ers don't feel comfortable enough about that. So I don't feel like they're making a mistake.
And the other thing with this time of year is you're figuring out what you have. You have draft picks, you have free agents. There's a lot of things that you've brought into your organization that you're looking at through the course of OTAs. Now, when you come out of OTAs, if you feel like you have a big deficiency in one area, then that's where you start talking about, okay, who can we go get to help upgrade this position? But at this time of year, the optimism is high, the growth potential is high, so you're not really making that move for a guy like him till probably camp.
Does it surprise you at all that he's on no one's short list at all in the entire league? Like, where does a guy like this end up?
Well,
now?
we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know if he's on someone's short list.
Well, if you're saying that you're waiting to the end of OTAs, waiting to see how your drafts work out,
No
waiting to
one
see
is.
who you have.
I think to Jenna's point, no one is
worried
he's
that
a high
someone
enough
else is gonna get
priority
him.
that it's like, man, we got to get him now
Before
because someone
else
is
gets
going
him.
to.
Well, we don't know if people have talked to his representatives, and he's probably on everybody's short list because he's probably the next best guy that you can go get. But you're not at the short list point at this time. And why would you talk about a guy unless you felt like you were going to get him? It just disrupts the chemistry in-house. I think when you make that move, you want to know that you can make it. You'd make it definitively. You bring him in as opposed to talking about it.
And he's no Pro Bowl player. I mean, if he's not on the Dallas Cowboys, are we talking about him this much? Like, we act like, oh, man, the 49ers, man, they're crazy. Oh, not signing Dez Bryant. They don't have any receiver. Dez Bryant hadn't done it. We can't say, oh, man, the guy hadn't performed the last 3 years and been like, well, why hadn't anybody signed him? Well, the lack of productivity, that's the reason why he's not signed.
So here's my question to you, C, because when he got cut, and you've been consistent on this, you thought for Dez's purposes.
Oh, that was that day you was telling Dez to hold out because you had the position
Listen,
on the organization.
No. That was the day before he got cut was the day I was saying he shouldn't take a pay cut because he has the leverage. It would appear I overestimated Dez's leverage. It was maybe bad advice by me that I gave to Dez and his agents at Rock Nation. My apologies. However, since he's been cut, the team that you circled that you thought for Dez's purposes would be a good fit is San Francisco because of their lack of receivers, because of the quarterback that they have. Is the real issue there what you talked about and what you alluded to, which is the complexity of the offense? How difficult that offense is for quarterbacks to learn in a year, how much shifting and movement, and Dez's limitations in that area.
It's one reason why New England is very selective and they do their due diligence as far as who they're going to bring into their system. We thought a number of years ago, perfect match, Chad Johnson with Tom Brady. Not so much. Like what they require you to do, the amount of information they make you retain. Most teams don't have the wide receivers, remember, let alone 3 positions, 2 positions. So when you don't have that flexibility and you don't have that, what you're trying to teach to your wide receivers week in and week out, and Kyle Shanahan is doing that, all right? I can make bodies fit, but I can't make players fit into a system. They're doing a good thing. You know what they did? They didn't, so they haven't made a mistake. So they might get through the OTAs and realize we need some more help. But it's important. You have to respect what Matty Ice has said. You know something, man, this system in year number 2, one of the smartest quarterbacks. We worked with Matty Ice at another place that I've worked. Very, very bright. When he says that, man, I struggled a little bit with the verbiage, with the terminology. You have to respect that. And Dez Bryant has not been known to be the strong part of his game. So I respect Kyle Shanahan and what he's trying to do, and they haven't made a mistake. Lynch has done a good job as far as putting talent on that roster.
And you're always limited by your hardest learner. And either as a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, if you want to have variety, if you want to be multiple, if you want to truly be game plan specific, if you have to account for one player who can't do those things, it's a huge limiting factor. And that's the last thing you want to you want to go into a situation where you want to be able to have options as opposed to, okay, how are we going to accommodate this one player? Now, if the player is really, really good.
You need ridiculous talent.
Yeah, you need ridiculous talent if I'm going to limit the scheme for you.
And that's how we started Randy Moss on. The talent was ridiculous. You got 3 routes you're going to run, and then we realized he was a football savant. And we was like, hey, man, you can come run the X. Hey, Randy, you can run the H, run the pump in the middle. Right. But there's very, very few players that have that type of football IQ.
And while Dez doesn't have that IQ, when you're talking about the talent, he was that guy talent-wise. I don't think he's gotten less intelligent than he was 3 years ago.
He was rewarded with that huge contract.
Absolutely right. He was able to do that with his physicality.
You said you're limited by your
hardest learner. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
It's better than weakest link phraseology. I like that.
Yeah.
Hard learner. He's a hard learner.
Oh, that's. You got water in your ear, Jenna?
Love you, Nick. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
As always, much appreciated this week.
Nick,
hey,
I'll see you
up,
next week.
Yeah.
In Cleveland.
when you're not there.
Yeah.
Hey, why do we want Kevin Durant to be LeBron James so badly? That's next on First Things First. First Things First, right now on your television screen. This is Antoine Walker. He once won an NBA title. He's now with us here to talk about many things basketball related.
It's okay to win a title.
Yeah.
Amazing. Are you kidding?
NBA title, invented the shimmy.
Yeah, and I won one in college, too.
Oh, that's right.
That is correct.
Big Blue Nation.
Did you beat, was it the team that beat Syracuse?
We beat Syracuse.
Yeah, John Wallace. Yeah, I remember that.
He had a good game.
Quite well. He had a good game. That's all right. And 3-time NBA All-Star.
Yeah.
Antoine Walker. It's our guy. And
Well,
great theories from earlier in the show. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Still taken back by the Boston stuff.
Let us talk Cavs Warriors Part 4. LeBron and the Cavaliers taking on Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and the Golden State. Truth is, LeBron carried his team to the NBA Finals, and while Kevin Durant didn't really have to, many are doubting whether he even could. KD responded to this, saying, I can't control that. I know what I bring to my team. I know my role on my team. I'm just trying to play in a way that'll help us win a championship. That's the only thing I can do. Antoine, what was your reaction to KD's comments?
Kind of the same as his move in going to Golden State. Obviously, he's not a guy that wants to be an A-list guy, I would call him. You know, it's B-list guys and A-list guys. He's not an A-list guy. I was really upset with the move to Golden State. As a competitor guy from, old school, you want to play against the best. And especially when they beat you, you were up 3-1, and then the team that beat you, and you decide to go join a team that has 73 wins, 2-time MVP, 3 All-Stars. That's not the team you join. You want to go against those guys, and he joined them. And obviously he had a lot of success in winning the championship, and they're going back to the finals again. But he's not a guy that wants to be the main guy on the team. It's obvious. I think we look at and try to compare him to LeBron James. There's no comparison in that sense. But Durant, to me, is a great scorer. We'll remember him as being one of the best efficient scorers for his size, something that we've never seen in NBA history, a 6'11", 7-foot guy that can put it on the floor, shoot it from anywhere, score from anywhere on the floor at an efficient level that he did. It has did it. So I think that's what we're going to remember Kevin Durant as. And obviously you're going to add some championships to that, and he'll be a Hall of Fame player. But he would never be in that conversation of LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson. He would never be in them type of conversations.
Now, and even though he thinks he is, and because this is something he's going to have to accept, because we are a product of our environment and our decisions, and that's what he is, because he decided to go to Golden State. Now, I'm different than you. I didn't have a problem with him going to Golden State, not because that's not what I would do, because I accept people for who they are. I just believe that in society we have too many people. We're always trying to change someone. We want someone to be something different. We want Durant to be LeBron. Well, what will LeBron be doing? They're not the same type of personality. They don't have the same type of game. They're not in the same stratosphere to me as far as what they do for a basketball team. Just because LeBron would do something, that don't make it right. And just because KD goes to the best team, that don't make it wrong. You control your own business future. And as an athlete, you have the right to be able to decide where you want to go to cultivate your talent, to get the best out of your ability. That's what he has, a responsibility to his talent. He don't have no responsibility to the NBA. He don't have no.
Hold on. But see, you're right. He has the right to. No one's denying he has the right to. But the idea that his talent was not being cultivated where it was, he was a multi-time scoring champion, league MVP, and a guy who was Every
He
year,
didn't want to play with Russ anymore.
Okay.
There's a lot of successful people. When you reach a certain level, you get to pick who you want to work with.
I understand. I get that part.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, but you can believe there's nothing wrong with it. I can believe.
Well, I know as someone who's very, very talented, I can go anywhere I want to cultivate the talent. Because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for getting the best out of my ability.
And see, if you think
I accept what Kevin Durant thinks is best for him. Compared to me suggesting what is best for Kevin Durant.
Listen, and if it's an athlete, non-athlete thing, that's fine. But as someone highly talented that has a lot of competitiveness can look at the same thing in Antoine and say, man, I hated this.
Well,
and it's not just.
That's why we live in such a beautiful world.
But hold on, just real quick, it's not just about what LeBron would have done. It is. There has never been an NBA superstar do this. That's why. It wasn't just, LeBron wouldn't have done this. It was.
So if KD goes back and joins the Wizards, we got more respect for him?
Absolutely.
Why, getting beat? Not winning the championship?
But who's
being on the list with Charles Barkley is one of the greatest players ever?
That's where I reject it. They could win a title. They could win a title.
Well,
His team was up 3-1.
You know what I reject?
What?
We've answered that question now. We don't have that. We don't have to worry about the Wizards. We don't have to worry about going to Boston. You know why? Because he's a champion now. He fulfilled a huge part of what he wanted to do.
I understand what you're saying, Chris. I get it. He had the choice to go where he want to go. Free agency, you go where you want to go. It's different. I think it's different in different players. I look at when I came as a free agent in 2005. I was not a Kevin Durant player. I wasn't considered to be the second best player in this NBA. But I went to a team and played with two other guys and contributed to get myself a title. I think when you think about Durant, we would consider him as the second best player. And there's some people out here thought he was the best player in the NBA. You don't go join a team that won 73 games, that won 2 NBA titles. They have a 2-time MVP. As a player and I'm a competitor, I'm not thinking, when I'm a free agent, I'm not even thinking about them. I'm thinking about how can I compete against them.
That's it. Everyone's not wired like you, bro.
Well,
everybody ain't from the streets of Chicago. Everybody ain't no champion like you was at Kentucky.
So
you know the reason why you went to Kentucky?
I want the challenge.
You wanted the challenge. You know the reason why he goes from Washington, D.C. to Texas?
Because he doesn't.
He didn't want no challenge. Right? But Texas is not known for their basketball, even though we knew Durant was only going to be there a year.
But so then to tie it into what the discussion is, while he has the right to have done whatever he wanted, you can, to use a cliche, cannot always have your cake and eat it too. Once you make this decision...
No, I expect people to criticize it, and I don't mind that.
But even set the criticism aside. Once you make this decision, you are not... People are going to say you couldn't carry a team like LeBron. Like, that's what he forfeited. Had he stayed in OKC and won a title, then we would be...
Who is comparing him to LeBron besides KD?
Listen, let me tell you something.
Nobody's comparing him to LeBron.
That's not true.
I don't care.
But it is true, because when LeBron's playing, LeBron's the best player. If you take LeBron out of the game, he's not a clear-cut best player in the NBA. Some would say maybe it's Steph. Some would say great years it could be rough. It's probably him. That's the difference. There's no other way to compare LeBron James and Kevin Durant.
I agree with you to a certain degree too, Jenna, because it's LeBron James and then it's a gap.
Yes.
And I put,
when
you're
all those guys with a great player, everyone is compared to that player. It's not like, hey, man, who's better, Steph or Harden? We don't care. We know they're not the best. Everyone is compared to LeBron, no different than when MJ had the crown or any other player that had the crown. Everyone is judged on whoever is holding up the standard.
But the idea, I can't, what you said, though, I can't let stand. There are a lot of people, right, on our network, on the other network, that go on TV all the time and say KD's the best player in the world. So the idea that comparison doesn't happen, the idea that everyone acknowledges universally LeBron's best, that's not accurate. It's on this show it's accurate, and I think on this show we are correct, but it's not accurate that it is a universal truth. It should be, but it is not one. But that is to me, to bring back to your point, what KD forfeited. Because KD has the skill set, and he's 4 years younger, to be able to push LeBron and eventually take that mantle. And the problem that he is, I believe, struggling with and dealing with is he realized, man, I hit the jump shot to win the finals in LeBron's face as finals MVP, and I'm still not better than him? Like, if he had done that without Steph and Clay, if he had done that in OKC, because that's the team that should have been there, or that was up 3-1 in the finals, if he had done that 2 years ago with OKC, then a lot of people would argue he's the best player in the world.
No, nobody would. When Kevin Durant's career is over with, you will say he was the best 6'11", 7-foot efficient scorer we've ever seen in the game. He will be one of the guys that have a championship. I look at Carmelo Anthony, he's a great scorer. Unbelievable. That's what he's going to be remembered as. Dirk Nowitzki got a title, but a 7-foot great scorer. That's what he's going to be remembered as. Those guys will be Hall of Famers. I'm not saying they're not going to be Hall of Famers. But Kevin Durant will never, ever be considered in the conversation as a GOAT, as the best player in this league, top 5 best player, no matter how many titles he wins. He will never be considered in that conversation. You don't hear guys talk about that. Everybody wants to compare. There's no comparison. Kevin Durant could not took that Cleveland team this year to the finals. He don't have the type of skill set. He can score the basketball. And you look at his numbers, he has had a couple years where he's averaged 5 assists a game. But it's easy to average 5 assists on Golden State when I got 2 of the best shooters in the world with me. That's not hard to do. So, and obviously, you're not getting double-teamed as much. So it's a lot of things that works in his favor playing with Golden State. But I just didn't like the move. I'm not for the move. I understand the move. When you're a free agent, you can go where you want to go. But as a competitor, a guy that wants to compete against the best, it's not a good move.